She taught me that everyone has the potential to give something back, that everyone indeed deserves a supporting hand in life.
In the world of the British monarchy, secrets are currency and silence is power. But every so often, something breaks through the walls of tradition and changes the story forever. This was one of those moments. Prince William stumbled upon his late mother, Princess Diana's final letter, a message sealed away for decades. What he found set in motion a chain of events that no royal aide could control. The words inside were personal, raw, and filled with truths many had fought to bury. And when William chose to share them with the world, it became the moment that shook the monarchy and left Queen Camilla facing an outcome she never thought possible: being cast out. The unearthed letter, it began on a quiet winter morning at Kensington Palace. William had been sorting through old personal belongings with a trusted archivist, a task he rarely had time for, but had promised himself he would finish before the year's end. Most boxes were filled with photographs, handwritten notes, from state visits and mementos from his early years. Then, tucked inside a faded leather-bound journal that once belonged to his mother, he found it, an envelope with his name written in Diana's unmistakable handwriting. The ink had faded slightly, but the careful curve of the letters was still as familiar as the smile he remembered. His breath caught. For a long moment, he just held it, tracing the edges with his thumb. The archivist, sensing the shift in his expression, quietly stepped back, leaving him alone in the dim light of the study. William turned the envelope over. The seal was unbroken. Across the back, in small, deliberate letters, were the words, "For William. When the time is right." His pulse quickened. Memories of his mother's warmth flooded in. The way she would bend to speak to him at eye level. Her laugh that could brighten even the most formal palace event. The way she always seemed to understand what he was feeling before he said a word. But alongside the nostalgia was an ache. Why had this letter been hidden? Who had decided when the time would be? He slid a finger beneath the seal and opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, the royal crest faint but still visible at the top. The handwriting was hers, slanted, elegant, and alive on the page. The first line made his chest tighten. "My darling William, if you are reading this, then I was right. The truth could not be kept from you forever." He stopped there, staring at the words, afraid to read on. Outside, snow was beginning to fall on the gardens, clinging to the bare branches. It was as if time itself had slowed, the palace holding, its breath with him. Finally, he read on, devouring every word. With each sentence, it became clear this wasn't just a mother's love letter to her son. It was a warning, a confession, and, at its core, it was about Camilla. By the time he reached the end, William's hands were trembling. The final line was short, but it carried a weight that rooted him to the spot. "When you stand as a man, remember this. Not everyone who smiles beside you wishes you well." He folded the letter back into the envelope and sat in silence. Somewhere deep down, he knew his life, and the life of the royal family, had just changed forever. William's private reading. That night, long after the palace corridors had gone quiet, William sat alone in his private study. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting long shadows across the room. On the desk before him lay the letter, its envelope still carrying the faint scent of old paper and time. He had read it once earlier in the day, but now, in the stillness, he felt compelled to read it again, slowly, letting each word sink in. The letter felt heavier than it should, as if his mother's voice had been sealed into the very fibers of the paper. He unfolded it carefully and began again. "My darling William." He imagined her voice, warm and steady, the way she used to speak to him when the world outside their bubble felt too loud. She wrote of her fears, not for herself, but for her sons. She spoke of loyalty, trust, and the subtle ways it could be, eroded when power and ambition were at play. And then came the part that made his heart pound harder. She spoke of Camilla. I have tried to keep my heart open to those around me, but there are some whose presence carries shadows. You may, one day, be asked to accept her as family. If you do, tread carefully. Her charm is a mask, and beneath it lies a will as unyielding as stone. I have felt it press against me, and I fear you will too. The words struck him with the force of a truth he had known but never wanted to face. For years he had worked to maintain civility, to bridge divides, to keep peace for the sake of the monarchy and his family. But here, in his mother's unmistakable handwriting, was her unfiltered view. It was not simply a letter, it was a warning, and it cast a long shadow over the woman who now wore the crown.
The next morning, William woke earlier than usual. Sleep had been restless, his mind replaying every sentence of his mother's handwriting in perfect clarity. The letter was still on his desk, but now it seemed to call to him, demanding to be read again. This time, he decided to take notes, not to analyze her words like a document, but to ensure they would be preserved in a way no fire, flood, or political decision could ever erase. He underlined her warning about palace life being a stage. He knew exactly what she meant. Years of engagements, charity events, and state visits had taught him that smiles could be rehearsed and warm gestures carefully calculated, but something about her words chilled him because she had seen the danger. In that performance, long before anyone else had, she also wrote about the loneliness she often felt. Even when surrounded by people, William paused, remembering how she would sometimes retreat into the gardens at Kensington Palace. Her head bowed, her hands deep in her coat pockets. Millions had loved her, yet she had been one of the loneliest people he had ever known. Then came the part about Camilla. The words were measured, not cruel, but they carried a weight of caution that William could feel in his bones. She wrote of charm that was never without purpose, of influence that could bend even the most steadfast. Intentions. I hope I am wrong, she had written, but I fear she will one day have the ear of those who shape your path. And if that day comes, remember to listen twice as hard to your own heart. This was not just a warning about Camilla as a woman. It was a warning about power itself, about how personal choices could be twisted into matters of state. Near the end of the letter, her tone shifted. She urged him to protect Harry, reminding him that the crown may rest on one head, but its weight is shared by those who love you. The final paragraph left William staring at the page for a long time. If you ever feel that truth is being buried, remember that sunlight will always find its way in. And if you must be the one to open the shutters, do it with courage, for the world will not thank you until long after you are gone. William realized then this was not just a private message. It was a manifesto, a call to action, a mirror, reflecting every doubt he had tried to bury over the years, and he knew he could not keep it to himself. Not any more confrontation in the palace. The decision to confront his father did not come easily. William carried the letter folded in his jacket pocket all day, its presence pressing against his chest like a heartbeat. He chose Clarence House for the meeting, away from the bustle of Buckingham Palace. Arriving in a dark overcoat, his jaw set, he walked through the halls with a determined stride. When he entered Charles's private study, the king looked up from his papers, surprised but not displeased. "William," he said warmly, though his expression shifted at the seriousness in his son's face, "I need to speak with you." Alone, once the aides had left, William placed the envelope on the desk. Charles's eyes fell on the familiar handwriting. His features tightened. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. "It was in one of Mother's journals," William replied. "It was meant for me, and I've read it." Silence hung heavy between them. Finally, Charles asked, "And what did it say?" William held his father's gaze. "It said enough about her life here, about what she saw, about what she feared." He paused, his voice sharpening. "And about Camilla." Charles's expression darkened. He remained composed but spoke carefully. "Your mother had strong feelings. You know as well as I do, the past is complicated." "It's not the past I'm talking about," William countered firmly. "It's the present, the influence she warned me about. And it's here right now. The air in the room seemed to chill. Charles exhaled slowly, his voice low. William, the crown is not strengthened by reopening old wounds. Whatever your mother wrote, it was from another time under different circumstances. William shook his head. No, she wrote it for a time like this. She knew it would matter, most when the stakes were highest, and I will not bury it. At that very moment, the door opened without a knock. Camilla stepped inside, holding a file. She stopped cold when she saw the letter on the desk. Her eyes flicked from the envelope to William's face, then to Charles. "What's going on here?" she asked. Neither man answered. But the weight in the room had shifted. Whatever happened next, the letter was no longer William's alone to carry. The leak to the press by the following morning. The palace was no longer the controlled, polished machine it had been the day before. Something had cracked. William left Clarence House with the letter still in his possession, but whispers had already begun to spread. Servants spoke in hushed tones. Aides avoided direct eye contact. The air carried tension like a storm about to break. The leak started small. A single post appeared on an obscure online forum for royal watchers. The user claimed to have overheard two aides discussing a private letter from Diana that mentioned Camilla by name. At first, it might have been dismissed as idle gossip, but within hours, screenshots circulated across social media. A royal gossip blog picked it up, publishing a story titled, "A Letter from the Grave. Whispers of Diana's Final Words Shake the Palace." The mainstream press hesitated at first, but soon, two separate sources confirmed that a personal communication from Diana had indeed been discovered by midday. Hashtags like #DIA, NAS letter, and #what she said were trending worldwide. The more the palace stayed silent, the louder the speculation became. Behind closed doors, William was furious. Not because the letter's existence was public, he had been considering releasing it himself, but because rumors twisted his mother's words, inventing lines she had never written. Camilla, on the other hand, was livid. She called an emergency meeting with her staff. "This is an intrusion into private family matters," she snapped. But beneath her anger was unease. She knew that if even a fraction of the letter became public, the narrative could turn against her in ways no PR campaign could control. By evening, newspapers had picked up fragments, allegedly from the letter. One line appeared again and again. "Not everyone who smiles beside you wishes you well." For millions of readers, the implication was clear, and by nightfall, the story had become unstoppable. The gala speech days later, the royal family gathered for a charity gala at Buckingham Palace. The event had been planned for months, but now it carried a weight no one had anticipated. Cameras were everywhere, journalists whispering, waiting. For even the smallest gesture that might confirm or deny the rumors of Diana's letter, William was scheduled to give the evening's keynote address. Traditionally, it would have been a safe, polished speech written by palace aides, filled with gratitude and light-hearted diplomacy. But William had rewritten it himself late into the night before. As he stood at the podium, dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, the room fell silent. The world was watching live. He began with formalities, thanking the organizers, speaking about the charity's mission. But then his tone shifted. He paused, looked out across the crowd, and let his voice steady. "Have always believed that the truth, however uncomfortable, has the power to heal," he said. "Recently, I came across words my late mother wrote to me many years ago. Words she hoped would guide me when the time was right." A ripple went through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. Charles shifted in his seat. Camilla stiffened. She reminded me, William continued, that not everyone who stands beside you does so with honesty in their heart. She reminded me that loyalty and integrity must guide us, not ambition, not appearances, and certainly not convenience. The audience was frozen. Every word felt deliberate, sharpened by the weight of history. I will not share every sentence of what she wrote that remains between a mother and her son, but I will say this: her voice is not gone. Her wisdom lives on, and it will continue to guide me, my family, and the responsibilities I now bear. When he stepped back from the podium, the hall erupted into applause. Some clapped politely, others clapped with genuine fervor. But one thing was clear: Diana's shadow now stood fully in the room. Public fallout the next morning. Every major newspaper carried the same headline in bold letters: William speaks Diana's truth. Clips of the speech dominated social media, reaching millions in hours. People who had lived through the 1990s saw it as vindication of a son honoring his mother's warnings. Younger generations saw it as bravery, a future king refusing to play the same old game. Public opinion began to shift overnight. Polls showed William's approval ratings surging. Meanwhile, Camilla's numbers plummeted. Commentators debated the meaning of his words. Some insisted it was a general statement about honesty, but most agreed it was a direct indictment of subtle but unmistakable rebuke of Camilla's place in the monarchy. At Buckingham Palace, tension reached a breaking point. Camilla confronted Charles in private. "I will not be made a villain in front of the entire world," she hissed. "You know what this is about? He's turning Diana's ghost against me." Charles, visibly worn, tried to reason with her. William is protecting his mother's memory. The people loved her. He cannot ignore that. But Camilla would not be pacified. "What of me? Am I to sit here and watch everything I've built crumble because of a letter written decades ago?" She stormed out, leaving Charles in silence. Camilla's exit weeks later, after relentless headlines, protests outside palace gates, and petitions demanding her removal, Camilla made her move. The official statement was brief, written with careful diplomacy. Her Majesty Queen. Camilla has chosen to step back from public duties in order to allow the monarchy to focus on the future. But behind the polished wording was the truth she had been forced out. Her public image shattered beyond repair. When the news broke, cheers erupted across parts of the country. Crowds gathered outside Kensington Palace, laying flowers not for Camilla, but for Diana, as if justice had finally found its way across time. William, watching from a palace window, felt no triumph, only a solemn weight. His mother's warning had been heard, but at a cost that left scars across his family. The aftermath in the weeks that followed, the monarchy adjusted to its new reality. William's speech was still replayed on television. His words etched into public memory, Charles carried on with his duties, quieter, more withdrawn, his relationship with his son strained, but unbroken. He knew William's actions had saved the crown's future, even if it had wounded him personally. As for William, he kept the letter locked away in a small wooden box in his study. He no longer needed to read it. The words were etched into his heart. But sometimes, late at night, he would take it out, hold it carefully, and imagine his mother's voice. The final line remained his compass. "When you stand as a man, remember, there's not everyone who smiles beside you wishes you well." He knew now what it meant. He had lived it. And though the palace walls still held secrets, one truth had finally broken through. Diana's voice would never again be silenced.